Welcome back to our podcast where the stories behind the screen are told with all the respect and nostalgia they deserve. In 1955, a television series debuted and forever defined the Western genre, leaving a deep and lasting impression on audiences in America and around the world. That series was Gunsmoke. With its story of enforcing justice in the dangerous town of Dodge City, the work was not only a massive commercial success that spanned 2 decades, but also became an unforgettable part of an entire generation's memory. But behind these classic characters were actors with their own unique destinies. More than half a century has passed, and time has etched different marks on their lives. Some continued to shine brightly. Some chose a quieter path, and some had to end their journeys in tragedy. Let's look back at the tumultuous journey of the cast who gave Gunsmoke its soul. James Arness as Matt Dillon. In Gunsmoke, the character of Marshal Matt Dillon was the heart, the pillar of justice in Dodge City. With his towering, imposing physique, stern face, and deep voice, James Arness brilliantly portrayed the image of a brave and righteous lawman. At the age of 32 when the show began, he became the unshakable symbol of the Western hero for 20 years. But behind that spotlight, James Arness' life was not without its shadows. A World War II veteran, he was seriously wounded in his right leg during the Battle of Anzio, an injury that plagued him for the rest of his life. Every step was painful, especially when riding a horse or standing for long periods on set, but he gritted his teeth to complete his role. This anguish was deepened by a series of family tragedies. His first marriage to Virginia Chapman fell apart in 1960, leaving a deep emotional wound. The tragedy peaked in 1975 when his daughter Jenny Lee committed suicide from a drug overdose, plunging Arness into a profound spiritual crisis. Just 2 years later, as if fate would not let him be his ex-wife, Virginia also died, tragically from an accidental overdose. Through long, lonely nights, he carried the guilt of a helpless father coupled with the persistent physical pain that drove his soul into one crisis after another. Yet he tried to remain strong, calm, and out of the spotlight so he could continue his work. What is most profound is the strange connection between the role and his life. It seems the role of Matt Dillon was woven into his very existence on screen. Matt Dillon was a resilient man who brought order to a chaotic town and quietly bore the burden of justice. In real life, James Arness was also a man who had to resiliently endure physical pain and unspeakable family tragedies. Character's stoicism and strength were a mirror of the actor's own relentless internal struggle. However, that tumultuous journey had to come to an end. On June 3, 2011, James Arness passed away at the age of 88, resting peacefully in Brentwood, Los Angeles. After his health gradually declined with age, his passing left a huge void. The legacy he left behind is not just a legendary role, but a profound life story about human endurance and dignity. Amanda Blake as Kitty Russell. In Gunsmoke, no one can forget Miss Kitty Russell, the strong and charming owner of the Long Branch Saloon, played by Amanda Blake. At 26, she embodied Kitty, the woman with fiery red hair and a heart full of both love and sorrow, becoming an indispensable icon of Dodge City for 19 years. But her real life, unlike her glamorous on-screen image, was full of turmoil. A heavy smoker, Blake was diagnosed with oral cancer in 1977. She underwent surgery and later became a spokesperson for the American Cancer Society. Her marital life was also incredibly turbulent, with 5 failed marriages. Most tragically, her 5th husband, Mark Spaeth, died of AIDS-related pneumonia in 1985, leaving painful questions about the cause of her own subsequent illness. After leaving Gunsmoke, Blake retired to Phoenix, where she dedicated herself to caring for wildlife. With her former husband, Frank Gilbert, she helped develop a breeding program for rare cheetahs and co-founded one of Arizona's largest animal conservation organizations, demonstrating a profound kindness and passion for nature. What is most profound is the complete contrast with her fate. On screen, Kitty was a successful woman, a pillar of stability in a volatile town who held a singular and enduring love for Matt Dillon. In real life, Amanda Blake was a woman who endured countless broken relationships, instability and life, and death battles with disease. However, the love and protection Kitty offered the people of Dodge City were mirrored in Amanda's real-life passion for protecting animals. However, that stormy journey ended in tragedy. On August 16, 1989, Amanda Blake passed away at the age of 60 in Sacramento from AIDS-related hepatitis. Her tragic end was initially concealed under a diagnosis of throat cancer. Her passing left a deep sense of loss for an icon of television. A woman who lived a life full of passion and immense pain. Milburn Stone as Doc Adams. As Dr. Galen Doc Adams, Milburn Stone created one of the most beloved characters in television history. When he began the role in 1955, he was 51 years old. The image of Dodge City's gruff but dedicated old doctor became synonymous with him, for 20 years giving audiences the image of a wise and deeply compassionate Western physician. Stone's life off-screen was also full of challenges. Coming from a vaudeville background, he patiently built his reputation through dozens of supporting roles before landing his defining role in Gunsmoke. The pressure of a long shooting schedule combined with age caused his health to gradually deteriorate. The worst came in 1971, when Stone had to undergo emergency heart surgery and take several months off from filming, though he still fought to return and finish his role until the series concluded. In his personal life, he had a turbulent marriage with Jane Garrison. They divorced and later remarried. His daughter was from his first marriage to Ellen Morrison, who passed away in 1937. Family troubles, combined with a demanding work schedule, may have quietly eroded his health, though he had no high-profile scandals. What is most profound is the connection between the role and his life. On screen, Doc Adams was the healer for the entire town, someone who always cared for the health of others, sometimes forgetting his own. In real life, Milburn Stone was a man who devoted himself completely to his art, perhaps trading his own health for the role. The character's dedication to the point of being cantankerous was a reflection of the actor's love for his craft and his perseverance. However, that dedicated journey had to come to an end. On June 12, 1980, Milburn Stone passed away from a heart attack at the age of 75 in La Jolla, California. After many years of living with heart disease, his passing closed the life of a true artist who became the doctor for an entire generation of viewers. Ken Curtis as Festus Hagen. Ken Curtis joined Gunsmoke in 1964 at the age of 48, playing Festus Hagen. He portrayed a somewhat scruffy, witty deputy with a distinctive country accent, bringing authenticity and humor to the series for 11 years. However, Ken Curtis' life off-screen was not as cheerful as he appeared. Born to a sheriff in Colorado, his childhood was filled with the pressure of strict discipline, often leaving Curtis feeling stifled and lonely. As an adult, he longed for freedom, abandoning medical school to pursue music and acting. This decision initially met with fierce opposition from his family, creating a distant relationship with his parents for many years. Curtis had 3 marriages, and his love life was a source of lifelong regret. His first 2 marriages quickly fell apart due to a demanding work schedule, sudden fame, and the stress of filming, making it impossible for Curtis to maintain a stable home. Only when he married Tori Connolly in 1966 did he find relative peace, though old emotional wounds still silently tormented him. What is most profound is the connection between the role and his life. The character of Festus, a funny but lonely man, seemed to partially reflect Curtis' true emotions. Festus' cheerful, bumbling nature on screen was a big contrast to the inner life of the actor himself, filled with regrets and loneliness. However, that journey, filled with laughter, but also much sorrow, ended abruptly. On April 28, 1991, Ken Curtis died of a heart attack in his sleep in Fresno, California, at the age of 74. The legacy he left is not just Festus, but a career in singing and acting that left a deep mark on audiences. Dennis Weaver as Chester Good. Dennis Weaver began playing Deputy Chester Good in Gunsmoke in 1955 when he was just 31. Chester, with his signature limp and loyal heart, became an icon of American television and helped Weaver win an Emmy in 1959. After 9 years in the role, Weaver left Gunsmoke in 1964 with serious doubts about his future. He threw himself into new roles such as in McCloud and Steven Spielberg's classic film Duel to prove his versatility. However, the pressure to change his image led to a serious mental crisis for Weaver. The fear of failure, of not being accepted by the public, haunted him, leading to many sleepless, stressful nights. Yet he worked hard, gradually emerging from Chester's shadow and establishing himself as a true star. Weaver's personal life was somewhat more peaceful as he maintained a long marriage to his childhood sweetheart, Jerry Stowell, and had 3 children. However, in 2003, he suffered a terrible blow when his daughter-in-law died in an accident. Trauma tormented the family for years. Furthermore, he had once struggled with poverty, working countless odd jobs to support his family before his fame, building a spirit of resilience and extraordinary determination. In his final years, Weaver dedicated his energy to environmental protection founding. What is most profound is the complete contrast with his fate. While Chester was a simple character content with his life and loyalty in real life, Dennis Weaver was a deeply ambitious man, constantly striving to prove himself and create change. Chester's limp was an acting choice, but Weaver's real battles were internal and with his illness. However, that resilient journey had to come to an end. On February 24, 2006, Dennis Weaver passed away at his home in Ridgeway, Colorado at the age of 81. His legacy is a diverse career and a life of tireless dedication to his art and to the planet. Roy Barcroft as Roy. Roy Barcroft began appearing on Gunsmoke in 1955 at the age of 53. He often played vicious villains, bringing drama and tension to Dodge City. Audiences loved him for this distinctive evil quality conveyed through his rugged looks and powerful voice. Roy Barcroft's life behind the camera was quite turbulent. At 15, he served in World War I and was seriously wounded. He then worked countless jobs: a cowboy, a sailor, and even a musician, before finally making it to the screen. His marriage to Vera Thompson was relatively peaceful since 1932. However, being typecast as a villain later in his career put a psychological strain on Barcroft, especially as the BW Western genre began to fade. We're surprised to learn that in real life, Roy was known for his mild-mannered nature, a stark contrast to his on-screen persona. In his late 60s, he was shocked when doctors diagnosed him with kidney cancer. What is most profound is the complete contrast between his roles and his life. The vicious villain on screen was a gentle man in real life, one who had to bear the psychological burden of being labeled the bad guy. However, that dedicated journey had to come to an end. On November 28, 1969, Roy Barcroft passed away peacefully at the age of 67. He donated his body to science in a final act of generosity. His legacy is the image of an artist who lived and died for the love of acting. Jack Elam as Pierre Audubon. Jack Elam began appearing on Gunsmoke in 1955 at the age of 35, with his distinctive crooked eye the result of a childhood accident. Elam easily portrayed tough, unpredictable villains, most famously Pierre Audubon, a brutal yet colorful character. Few would have guessed that Elam's life held so much bitterness. He lost his mother when he was only 4 and had to work various odd jobs to help his family. His greatest tragedy came at the age of 11 when a pencil was stabbed into his eye. As a result, he lost sight and was left with a lazy eye, a trauma that haunted him for the rest of his life. However, that very same strange eye led him to Hollywood. But behind the screen, Jack also suffered. His first wife died of colon cancer after 24 years together, leaving him to raise their child alone before he found peace with his second wife. Elam surprised audiences by transitioning from villainous roles to comedy, proving he was not a one-dimensional actor. However, age did not spare him. In his final years, he struggled with congestive heart failure and declining health, yet he still sought small roles to sustain his passion for acting. What is most profound is how a personal tragedy became a professional asset. He turned a childhood injury into a unique identifying feature, an immortal symbol of American Western cinema. However, that difficult yet glorious journey had to come to an end. On October 20th, 2003, Jack Elam passed away at the age of 82 at his home in Ashland, Oregon. His legacy is an admirable career and a story of resilience. Victor French as Eben Lucan. Victor Edwin French was only 32 years old when he joined Gunsmoke in 1966. He played Eben Lucan, a stern man with a hidden kindness. The character was beloved for his powerful build, deep voice, and a face marked by sadness, which made him both intimidating and likable. However, Victor French's life behind the camera was far from peaceful. He endured 2 failed marriages, leaving him with the burden of supporting 3 children while working a grueling, relentless filming schedule. The stress of providing for his family and the pressures of fame led him to turn to smoking as a toxic coping mechanism that persisted for many years. Although he seemed to be reborn with his role as Mr. Edwards in Little House on the Prairie in 1974 and later shown in Highway to Heaven opposite Michael Landon, Victor secretly battled a smoking addiction that was destroying his health day by day. In 1989, he was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. What is most profound is the contrast between image and reality. While his characters often found redemption and peace in real life, Victor French was fighting an addiction that ultimately consumed him. The sadness in his character's eyes often reflected a very real unhappiness. However, that promising journey had to end tragically. 3 months of battling chemotherapy and pain could not save his body ravaged by decades of smoking. On June 15, 1989, Victor French passed away at the age of 54, leaving his closest co-star Michael Landon and audiences to mourn his loss. Burt Reynolds as Quint Asper. Burt Reynolds joined Gunsmoke in 1962 at the age of 26, playing Quint Asper. As the strong yet sensitive, half-Comanche blacksmith Reynolds quickly made his mark on the small screen with his rugged, captivating personality. Although he only spent 3 seasons on Gunsmoke, the role of Quint opened the door to Hollywood, transforming him into a superstar in the 1970s and 80s. However, beyond the spotlight, Reynolds' life was filled with tragedy, failed marriages, especially his costly and highly publicized divorce from Lonnie Anderson damaged both his spirit and his finances. Reynolds once admitted that he never truly let go of his feelings for Sally Field, a deep but unrequited love that left him with immense regret. Furthermore, the pressures of being a movie star, with the constant need to maintain a masculine image, led Reynolds to break down repeatedly due to loneliness and mental health crises. Years of non-stop action films also took a toll on his health. From a fall during a rescue mission to a serious jaw injury in the 1984 film City Heat, he struggled with a long-term addiction to painkillers along with anxiety and hypoglycemia, which further weakened him. In 2011, he underwent life-saving open-heart surgery. Since then, his body steadily declined. In his private life, Reynolds once possessed an enormous fortune, however failed. What is most profound is the contrast between the image and the reality. On screen, Quint and later Reynolds' superstar persona was the epitome of strength and confidence. But in real life, he was a man tormented by insecurity, loneliness, financial hardship, and physical pain. However, that journey full of glory and turmoil had to end. On September 6, 2018, Burt Reynolds died of a heart attack at the age of 82. His legacy is a brilliant career and a story about the high price of fame. Morgan Woodward as Bear Sanderson. Thomas Morgan Woodward appeared in Gunsmoke, starting in 1955 at the age of 30. He appeared in 19 episodes portraying 16 different characters. The most famous of these was Bear Sanderson, a brutal man with a complex psychology, with his impressive physique, booming voice, and cold stare. Morgan became a familiar face in westerns, specializing in tough, brutal villain roles. Morgan's off-screen life was also turbulent. He endured numerous volatile relationships but never married, living alone for decades. A terrifying turning point came when he suffered a stroke right on set. Fortunately, he recovered after several months of physical therapy. But the shock caused Morgan to withdraw even further, dedicating all his energy to acting and avoiding personal contact. After his recovery, Morgan continued to act tirelessly, from Cool Hand, Luke in 1967, where he played the eyeless boss Godfrey with dark glasses who haunted audiences, to the cunning Marvin Punk Anderson in the series Dallas in the 1980s. He also left a strong mark in Star Trek. What is most profound is the parallel between his roles and his life. The image of cold, tormented figures with deep internal struggles seemed to reflect the man himself. He was a solitary man who channeled his reclusiveness and intensity into his art. However, that nearly 70-year journey of dedication came to a close. On February 22, 2019, Morgan Woodward passed away at the age of 93 from natural causes due to old age. His legacy is the image of menacing, brooding, and tragic cowboys. George Selk as Moss Grimmick. George Selk began appearing on Gunsmoke in 1955 at the age of 62, playing Moss Grimmick, the owner of the Dodge City stables, a simple character who brought realism and everyday life to the Wild West. However, outside the spotlight, Selk's life was rather quiet and difficult. He spent many years performing in local theaters, which did not bring him much recognition. His marriage and family life were largely unknown. Selk's health also deteriorated rapidly after leaving Gunsmoke, leading to his final months being filled with illness. Despite this, he clung to acting with an unwavering passion and was beloved by local theater groups for his gentle personality and dedication to the art form. What is most profound is the perfect parallel between his role and his life. The simple background character on screen was also a simple background actor in real life. Moss Grimmick was an essential but quiet part of Dodge City. George Selk was an on-scene, essential but quiet part of the acting community, living for his art without needing the spotlight. However, that quiet journey had to end. On January 22, 1967, George Selk passed away at the age of 73, buried in silence and mourned by a few former colleagues. His legacy is a long but little-known career of a supporting actor who lived for his art until his last breath.